would you describe liminal spaces? Unsettling? Existential? Artificial? These low-quality, empty and atmospheric pictures of architecture or human-made objects in general have gained a great amount of attention over the last few years, and people have expressed their feelings towards them in extensive detail, mainly on the disturbing nature of these pictures and the eerie feeling you get when looking at them. But while these existential and often pessimistic analyses are fascinating in their own right, I only relate to them to a certain degree. Liminal spaces are disturbing, creepy and lonely, no question. But for me and for some other people, they mainly give off a sense of comfort. A sense of comfort so prevalent that I consider looking at these bizarre, abnormal pictures as a relaxing and calming experience. A sense of comfort that is the strongest when you're mentally at your lowest. At those moments where you just want to vanish from this reality and dive into another one. Let's talk about the comfort of liminal spaces and the desire to disappear. What are liminal spaces? A lot of people have tried to come up with a definition for this phenomenon. The most accepted definition of liminal spaces defines them based on the meaning of liminality, which derives from the Latin word limen, which simply means threshold. In this case, a liminal space would simply be a transitional space or state. A place where you aren't supposed to stay for long periods of time, where you're simply supposed to pass through, like a highway, a hallway, or a mall. And to be fair, transitional spaces make up a huge part of liminal space photographs. But then there are liminal spaces like this one. It's the interior of a house with surprising little amounts of furniture. You wouldn't call a home a transitional space. Maybe in the grand scheme of things, but not in the traditional sense. The uncanny feeling you might get from this picture might come from the fact that the room has been ripped out of the context it has been designed for, which would be to be filled with furniture. This same idea can be applied to empty highways, hallways and malls. They aren't designed to be empty. Highways should be filled with passing cars. Hallways are meant for people to walk from one point to another. And when going to a mall, it's usually filled with groups of people. This eerie feeling is also referred to as canopsia, the eerie fallen atmosphere of a place that's usually bustling with people but is now abandoned and quiet. So, liminal spaces are either transitional spaces or spaces that have been ripped out of their designed context, or a combination of both? Maybe, but it doesn't explain pictures like this one. A perfectly normal basement with normal looking furniture and kids' toys. I think we can all agree that despite the fact that this isn't a transitional space or a place that has been removed from its design context, that it's still a liminal space. You might argue that a kid's playroom is designed to have kids playing in it, so in that way it has been ripped out of its designed context. Alright, fair. But how about this picture? You've seen pictures like these a million times. It's one of those typical pictures that you might find in a catalog from a furniture company. Even though the photograph doesn't feature kids playing in the room, nobody would consider this a liminal space photograph. I think you get the idea that coming up with a definition for liminal spaces isn't the easiest thing in the world. So maybe we need to take a different approach. When you see a liminal space picture, you immediately identify it as such. You don't have to check first if it's a transitional space or if it has been removed from its designed context before noticing that it is a liminal space. No. You know it's a liminal space because of the specific feeling you get when looking at it. I think it has been universally accepted that the feeling you get when looking at liminal spaces is quite unique. Even though the way a liminal space achieves to produce this feeling varies from picture to picture, the produced feeling stays pretty much consistent throughout all pictures. In my opinion, we should define liminal spaces based on the feeling associated with them, rather than based on their physical traits or the way this feeling gets produced, since the feeling generally stays the same across all different types of liminal spaces. Neither should we base our definition solely on the meaning of the term liminal. The only two physical traits that are consistent throughout all liminal spaces are the presence of man-made structures or objects and the absence of people. We can base our definition on those two principles. What do you feel when looking at liminal spaces? Fear? Nostalgia? Discomfort? Of course, this is something that differs from person to person. Some people don't feel anything at all when looking at liminal spaces. But this video and liminal spaces in general aren't for those people. Due to their usually early 2000s setting and aesthetic, a time period during which most users on the internet grew up, liminal spaces emit a strong sense of familiarity, but at the same time a sense of uneasiness. It's like something is wrong, but you just can't exactly pinpoint it. It's kinda like the uncanny valley, but for infrastructure, objects, or even nature that has been manipulated by humans. They emit the feeling of loneliness, despite the fact that those spaces aren't supposed to feel lonely in everyday life. This mix of uneasiness and familiarity applies to basically every liminal space picture. Sometimes the familiarity aspect is stronger than the creepy aspect, or the other way around, but it's always the combination of those two feelings that make liminal spaces feel liminal. Now again, what is a liminal space? After my definition, a liminal space picture is a picture that features human-made or manipulated structures or objects that doesn't contain any people and that emits a strong feeling of familiarity, but at the same time a feeling of uncanniness and discomfort. Not the most elegant definition, but it ticks all the boxes.